Good evening, everybody. If I may call the meeting to order. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards and I'm Chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so if one does sound, we will be evacuating. The fire exits are the way you came in, and if for whatever reason that is blocked, there are fire exits behind us, but don't worry, we will be able to escort you out. Can I ask colleagues please to have their mobile phones and tablets and everything turned to silent, and also members of the public. Welcome to members of the public. There is a residence feedback form available to you on the chairs here and also on a drop-down menu. For those that may be following us on YouTube, you are encouraged to provide feedback. It helps us improve our meetings. We have a reasonable agenda and some changes to it, which I will announce in a minute. But beforehand, I will just very quickly explain to you how the meeting is run and who the people are around the table. The Planning Committee are made up of councillors, and they are the voting members of the committee. As chairman, I will only vote in the event of a tie. And I will introduce to you the councillors around the table, starting on my far right-hand side this time. Councillor Arkin-Bolana, Councillor Tuckwell, Councillor Brighton, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Chamdal. On my far left-hand side, Councillor Beera, Councillor Dillon, and Councillor Duncan. The other people around the table are officers of the council, and they're here to provide expert advice in various different capacities. Nicole Cameron is our principal lawyer and provides planning law advice. Luke Taylor, Democratic Services, and keeps me in line in the meeting. James Rogers, Head of Planning, will give us planning advice. Meg Harani will be presenting the applications, but can also assist with planning advice. And Ahmed Akram is our Highways Engineer and will advise us on highways matters. Okay, that is the preliminaries. We will get through some very quickly the agenda, and as we do, I will talk about part one, part two, as we get to that point. Okay, so item one, apologies for absence.
We've had no apologies.
Thank you. Item two, declarations of interest. Are there any additional declarations, colleagues? There are none. Thank you. Sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting, which are in our pack. These are the meeting of the 4th of December. Thank you. Item 4, no matters have been notified in advance or urgent, so we will be taking just the published agenda. Item 5 is to confirm that items marked Part 1 will be considered in public and Part 2 will be considered in private. Part 1 are the planning applications, and they will be open to public to discussion in front of the public, and also can be followed online on YouTube. Part 2 are matters of enforcement, which are, the discussion is held in private, as those matters can result in enforcement action, and it's not in the public interest for that to be disclosed at this stage, the discussion to be disclosed at this stage. However, the item and the decision are published and are available. There will be a break between Part 1 and Part 2. Any members of the public who are remaining will be asked to leave. And we will also break the YouTube link at that point. Now, with regards to the way the meeting is run, even though we're meeting in public in Part 1, there are no general speaking rights. The only people that are able to speak to the committee are petitioners, and we do have some petitions submitted this evening, although we may not have the petitioners here with us yet, and also all councillors of matters affected. Other comments can't be accepted from the floor. Okay, so we're now ready to get into our business, and we do turn to a petition item. This is item number 6. I will, for the sake, announce now that item 12 has been withdrawn, and depending on progress, I would expect to take the petition items 6, 7, and then I know that we have a member of the agent in relation to item 10, so we will go to the Hillingdon Hospital just to not keep members of the public longer than is necessary. So we'll go to item 6, please, 40 Barnhill Road.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just first of all address the issue relating to the description of development and the addendum sheet. There is an amendment to the description of development set out in the amendment sheet, which relates in essence to the front extension that's proposed. So the revised description of development should read part 2-storey, part single-storey, front, side and rear extension, and first floor rear extension. In relation to the development itself, this is for extensions to a semi-detached 2-storey dwelling, and members will note from the history section that a very similar application was refused last year, and two of those reasons related to the impact of the width of the extension and its proximity to the boundary, and the setback from the front. Members will know that there are requirements set out within the council's policies and standards with regard to 2-storey and single-storey extensions, and two of those requirements are that the 2-storey extension must be set in 1 metre from the boundary, and it must be set back 1 metre from the main front wall. In this particular case, the extension is not set back 1 metre from the main front wall, as that existing plan, as that plan illustrates. It is in fact forward of that, and the extension is not set in at all from the boundary. So for those two reasons, it is recommended for refusal. There is an amendment to the reason for refusal number 1, and that relates to the design of the rear extension. Your officers do not consider that the hip roof to the rear extension is unacceptable in its design terms, and therefore have taken that element of the reason for refusal out of the, that element out from the reason for refusal. Just the photographs. And members will note that a 2-storey extension with a hip roof has been built on adjoining properties. So for the two reasons set out, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. As I say, this was a petition item, but there is no petitioner present, and not either the applicant. Are you wishing to speak? Please, if you wish to come forward. Three-minute speaking time. You're very familiar with the rules. Thank you very much.
I will ask you to remind me. Thank you very much.
Then 3 minutes, 2 minutes on the green light, 1 on the amber, and when it comes to red, I will draw you to a close. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's only 9 months since I was last here, talking exactly the same thing about an identical application. It does worry me that we've got an applicant who is clearly just trying to play the system by forever making applications. I don't know whether there's anything which can be done about that, but that's down to the officers, I guess. The fact is that, as the team leader has mentioned, this would create almost a terraced house in a road which, on that side at least, is entirely semi-detached properties, and would completely change the whole view and environment of that road. So not only myself but all of the petitioners, who regret not being able to be here, believe that it is really unacceptable and would set a very poor precedent, in that other neighbours would potentially want to build up exactly the same. So that's the basis on which I ask the committee to refuse the application.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions or clarification? Councillor Duncan.
I think the councillor makes a point about us receiving identical applications, and I believe there is something in the legislation that at some point we can refuse to accept applications if they are made, because identical applications that are made, because it's regarded as wasting public time, I think.
Can I just ask for clarification? Is this an identical application?
It is almost identical.
No, is it identical, yes or no?
I think what the legislation says is that it's very similar. So It doesn't have to be identical. It is very similar. We couldn't turn this one away because they can make two applications within, I think, 2 years. I'm not sure. My legal colleague may be able to enlighten us, but within 2 years they can make two applications. If they haven't appealed either of those, we can turn away a third application. So if they make another one without appealing this application, we can refuse to accept the next one, as it were.
I think the point has been made that we should be minded to refuse it if a very similar application comes in within the time.
I think it's helpful for that advice to be given publicly, because I think members of the public who get up petitions repeatedly say, why do we have to do this when they can put in virtually identical applications? So if we can tell members of the public, tell residents, look, they can't do this for another 2 years, I think that's helpful to let them know.
I'll let Head of Planning comment.
We could put an informative on the decision notice. Then, as the decision notice is a public document, then this issue is put in the public domain. I would obviously ask my legal colleague to help officers word that, but I can't see any reason, unless my legal colleague says otherwise, we can't add an informative on the decision notice.
Between Meg and James, they've said everything that I was going to say. I'd agree with an informative. I think it's a very good way to let the public know the position, and I'm happy to assist James, Head of Planning, in relation to that.
Thank you. I think we will be asking them for that, and it should also be known that, of course, this is on YouTube and is public, and the discussion's in the domain and the explanation given. We are now. Sorry, were there further questions of clarification? No. Thank you very much. If I could invite you, please, then to return to your seat. No, I don't think you can. You have 3 minutes speaking time. You haven't been asked for... Sorry? It's not it's not a question to councillor. I can't allow it. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Colleagues, this is now a matter for you to debate and discuss. Councillor Dillon.
There's very little to discuss. I'd move officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Chandel.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I quite agree. I think we don't need to waste any more time on this, and definitely put the informative on the decision notice, and I will second the decision.
Thank you. Can you show of hands then, please, on this one? That's everybody. Thank you. Application is refused, and please to include the informative on the refusal notice. The second petition item, agenda item 795, Wood End Green Road, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, if I can refer members to the history section, and in particular the section relating to the previous application, which went to appeal for a single-storey extension for additional storage to the property. Members will note that that appeal was allowed, and the building as proposed is virtually the same as that which was allowed. So in terms of street scene and visual impact, the building is acceptable. The change that has occurred is that the previous application was for an extension and storage in relation to the ground floor retail unit, and in this particular case the application does not relate to the ground floor retail unit. It is proposed does not fully relate to the ground floor retail unit. It's proposed as a food production area, and the details are set out within section 7.08. We did ask for further information regarding the use, and the applicant has stated that it is not in connection with, although they may well be preparing food for sale within the shop, they are also going to be preparing food which is not related to the retail unit. So it is in essence a standalone industrial unit that's being proposed, and of course that has wider implications, including the impact on adjoining occupiers and servicing and parking and manoeuvring implications, and no information has been provided in relation to either of those issues, and therefore we are recommending refusal due to the impact a possible impact on residential units from what may occur within the unit, and also from the servicing and so on associated with that unit. If I can just take members through the plan. That's the existing situation, and then you can see the extension. It is a substantial extension that's proposed, goes virtually the whole length of the rear. There are residential units with their frontages situated in here, so they have frontages which look out that way, and they're very close. So this is the unit itself, and then this is what the inspector considered to be acceptable in visual terms, and this is the partially finished unit. Yeah. So it's so as I say, we did ask for quite a lot of further information. The only further information we did receive was that the use was not related to the retail unit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harani. Councillor Chamdal, you indicated.
It's the police, isn't it? I mean, we make decisions on what's put before us. The officers have not got the information. They're not engaging. So, as far as I'm concerned, we've got the officer's recommendation, and I'll put that forward for refusal. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duncan, thank you. Show of hands, please, on this one. The application is refused. Sir, I understand you're here for Hillingdon Hospital. Is that correct? I'm just going to ask the officers to shuffle the cards and bring Hillingdon Hospital to the fore. We will take that item next for you. We now turn to agenda item 10, Hillingdon Hospital.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. This is an application for temporary building for winter. If I can get to my papers. Thank you. Temporary prefab building, which is to provide 20-bed decant and winter overspill ward. The application is, in essence, generally acceptable. It does involve reworking of the parking areas, but there is no net loss of parking, particularly visitors parking, and this is set out in the addendum. We have received a request that the condition 1 is amended to provide a 10-year period, and the reasons for that are set out as requested by the applicants, and the reasons why they wish to do that are set out in the addendum. Given the reasons that are set out, your officers are of a mind to agree the 10-year permission rather than to grant 5 years and then come back 5 years later and grant it again. It would seem sensible to grant it based on the reasons provided. So there is an amendment to that condition. In essence, the general building is acceptable. It is a prefab building. There are wider plans for redevelopment of the overall site, and master plan is being worked on currently. So until that comes forward, we are going to get applications for temporary buildings across the site, and visually they may not be particularly brilliant, but in this situation I think we have to accept them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Just bring in Mr. Rogers, please.
Yeah, unfortunately, blatantly, there's a small matter that does concern me. So this is a reasonably large building, 743 square metres, 20 beds. Although it has an appropriate ramp level access to the front of the building, there's fire exits that involve staircases. To cut a long story short, it's 2020, and if committee delegated to me, I think we could condition further that they also have ramped access.
Thank you. I think that was very, very helpful. The two concerns that I had with the fire exits and also no net loss of visitor parking. And as long as it's emphatically clear in the conditions that there is no net loss of parking, and that meets my concerns. Councillor Duncan, you were indicating.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I very much welcome that we are providing additional capacity at the hospital, albeit, we're going to have to wait longer term for, a much larger redevelopment, because we've seen major developments in our borough and big increases in population here, and it's one of the things that I think all of us are concerned about: medical facilities, including hospital facilities. So I'm happy that you did raise that issue about fire exits, because if people are very ill or on stretchers and have got to be taken out, they're not going to manage stairs, are they? So I would like to agree officer's recommendation on this, or propose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chandler?
I agree with Councillor Duncan's remarks. Just want to ask about my only concern was about the visitor parking, because that PD road, it does suffer with traffic when people turning left into the hospital. So we're absolutely sure that there's no loss at all of visitor parking.
There is spaces being provided in various ways, i.e. by taking out some landscape areas, and also by moving the access barrier, and so that results in additional parking, and therefore there is no net loss of visitor parking from what is available currently.
Okay, in that sense, I will happily second it, with obviously delegated authority to head of planning in regards to fire exits.
Thank you very much, and the clarification on that delegation as well. Is that agreed? Having been put? That's everybody. Thank you. That has been agreed for the 10 years, and there's a little bit of work to be done on the fire exits, and no loss of visitor parking. Okay. We'll turn back now to the start of a number of monopoles. Agenda item 8, land. Mr. Roger will just say a few words before we get into the full discussion.
We're currently in the process of dealing with a suite of telecom masts involving same operator, same agent. Obviously, that's not relevant to individual determinations, but the point I wanted to make is we have asked the agent, why do we need to have so many cabinets? And we haven't had an answer. And that was done ahead of the last committee meeting. So I just wanted to mention that for the record. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, if we can turn to agenda item 8, land fronting Park Parade, Barrow Hall Circus, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is, as members will note, and as my colleague has said, part of a number of applications we've received for telecoms development, and it's very similar in terms of the size of the monopole that's proposed, and the number of equipment cabinets and the size of the equipment cabinets that are proposed. Most of the proposals are replacement monopoles, and in large majority of the cases they do involve resiting the monopole from one position to another, and Barrow Hall site is one of these, which involves a resiting of the monopole. Currently the monopole is in a position in here, and it is being moved to this position, and as members will see from the photographs, it is a much more prominent position, if you like. So currently it is set in amongst the landscaping and so on in this position, and it is set virtually on the footpath edge adjacent to the railings in that position. So that's the current one. It is prominent, but not in your officer's view as prominent as the proposed one would be. It is higher, and also it's in a different position, so it is being positioned. Sorry, if I can go back to the photographs and show you the position. It is being positioned on the footpath edge, adjacent to these railings, so your officers consider that the siting and its prominence is is unacceptable. So for the reasons set out, we're recommending refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rani. Unusually, as Chairman, I just would like to make a comment that's not only applicable to this monopole, but all the others. And that is the absolute need for consistency, which we need to be in our decision-making. I also am very mindful of the fact of the economic benefits of a 5G network, both nationally and also locally, that it's in our economic interest in the Borough, and the Borough supports the government's ambition to improve our digital access. My understanding is that comes with 20-metre monopoles. So if we want 5G, we have to live with 20-metre monopoles. So for me, the size of the monopole is not an issue. What is always a concern is the siting and the paraphernalia that goes with it, the cabinets. And I do believe that they are proper. However, I think we need to be consistent in our decision-making. If a 20-metre pole is ordinarily acceptable, then it should be ordinarily acceptable. And we shouldn't be chopping and changing our position as we go about, because they can't chop and change the height of these things. They can just change the siting of them. And therefore, the siting for me is the key bit here. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I think we will accept that, Chair. Thank you. But actually, it being a 20-metre monopole makes the siting even more relevant and even more important, and one has to be sensitive to that. I do agree with all the points made by the officer. I think the number of cabinets is also an issue. I mean, when there used to be 1 or 2 cabinets, they were almost invisible. The eye passed over them. Now we're getting a whole array of these things. So I'd like to move officer's recommendation on this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tupwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the comments that have been made by yourself and Councillor Duncan there. If we want 5G, we've got to have the infrastructure that comes with it, and I think we do not want Hillingdon to be left behind or forced into a position of having to sort of take decisions without the benefit of being scrutinised by the planning committee. So the issue around street clutter is one that needs to be addressed, but I think the size of the poles is something we need to be consistent with, so I welcome those comments and I'm happy to second.
Okay. Do I take from the inference of those comments that the refusal around the size and design of the proposed monopole should be deleted from this refusal reason?
Exactly, yes.
And what we are doing is the proposed development reason, by reason of the siting of the proposed monopole, the quantity, size and scale of the siting of the equipment cabinets be the refusal reason. That's what's being proposed.
Yeah.
Is that right, Councillor Duncan?
What are you saying?
We just delete size and design on the first line. So the reason of the siting of the proposed monopole, the quantity, size, scale and siting of the equipment cabinets.
No, I think the thing is you need to keep the whole lot in, because we're saying, yes, we accept that 5G has 20-metre monopoles, but we're saying that in some cases that is acceptable, but in some cases it isn't. And so I would want that kept in. I don't think you would take that out. We know that they're the same everywhere else. Why are we refusing them in some areas and not in others? Because that particular size and siting design is not acceptable in that place. So I don't accept what you are saying on that. Sorry.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confuse things even more, I was going to suggest that we delete the word design, because ultimately these are all exactly the same, and if you want 5G, that's the shape they come in, sort of thing. But I would suggest in a way that size is relevant to coin a phrase, because it depends in the location. If a 20-metre pole is relatively close to very high trees, it doesn't stick out. Whereas if it's in the middle of a field that's flat, it does stick out. So I think the context and location is relevant to size. So I would have suggested keeping the word size because it's relevant, but I would have suggested deleting the word design.
Okay, well, what I really don't want to get into is too much weed here, but I want us to be consistent. It is interesting that in both reference, when we're talking about size, it's size in the context of siting, and it is the siting that is the issue, and not necessarily the size per se. The 20-metre, although you're right, in this location, 20 metres is not acceptable. Would 10 metres be?
Yeah.
Is another matter.
Well,
that
that's
could
my
be
point.
that could
That's
be
my
the
point.
argument.
Yeah.
Okay. let's leave it as it's written by the officers then, rather than trying to take it on the fly. However, I would like officers please to reflect on the discussions that have been heard here and to try and arrive at a consistent position that doesn't give the impression that this borough is being obstructive to it. We are not obstructive to it. What we want is proper engagement so that we can find the best siting so that it has the least detrimental impact on our residents but provides 5G. And that we have to accept will come with a certain standard design and a certain standard size. Is the other issues that will be open for discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair, for those comments, but I do think that unless the industry hears what planning authorities, not just us, but those all over the country, if we're all going to say, oh look, this is 5G, we just have to lay down and accept it, that isn't helpful to them. If we point this out to them, then presumably people in the industry will be engaged enough to look at those issues and try and move the technology forward so that it is less intrusive, so that the cabinets can be smaller, so that, you know, these things can improve over time. So I do think it's worthwhile making those points, but I take your point entirely about consistency and not saying, yes, we do want this technology, but we don't want it anywhere near us. Of course we want it, but we need them to improve it as well.
Fine. Okay. We have the officer's recommendation as it's written here. They will reflect on the wording for the future use. Consistency is important going forwards. We want to create the right message, but also we want the ability to challenge on some key issues. The last thing we want to see is a change in the framework such that this becomes permitted development and we have no say. And that is the risk of us being too restrictive in our decision making. Okay. So we've proposed and seconded on the basis of what's written before us. Is that supported? A show of hands, please. Thank you. The next few will be a lot quicker now. Please. Agenda item 9, the land opposite Dawley Road, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is another application for telecoms development, very similar in terms of size and number of cabinets and so on to the previous application. However, this is an application that's recommended for approval because its impact is very limited. There is an existing monopole in this position. The position of the monopole remains the same. There is an increase in number of cabinets and size, but again, given the backdrop of the large existing hedge and trees, your officers consider that the visual impact will be limited, so it is recommended for approval. If I can just go, members will have seen these and very similar plans. So that's the existing and the proposed and the siting, and this is the existing monopole, as you can see. It will be higher, but it is against the backdrop of these large hedges and trees, and your officers consider that the equipment cabinets, and there are some there, which obviously you can't see, which is a good thing, I guess, and therefore the number and size of cabinets in this particular case your officers consider will be well screened, so it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Alphen-Lana.
Well, that needs to be quicker than the previous application because we have discussed everything, whatever was bothering. And, I will propose with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chandal?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, you can see from that photograph especially, you can see all the cabinets are relatively hidden. And the siting, as we discussed in the last application, it absolutely is paramount. I mean, it's put another 7 metres on top of that, all right, it's still 21 feet, but it's still in old money. It's still hidden pretty well, so we don't reject en masse just because we've got 9 cabinets and everything else. It's a better place for it, so I would go with the officer's recommendation on this one.
Thank you. That is a seconding, is it? Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Dunn.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I just have an opinion on the road safety aspect of it? Because when people are working on it, that is a road that 30 miles per hour, there's a bush there, where will they park to work on it? And then you're going to have someone, there's no real pavement there.
Could our highways engineer comment on this, maybe? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, you're going to have to put in a condition for a construction logistics plan. I think that'd be the best way of moving forward. I think the head of planning would need to be delegated powers for such an act.
Thank you. Head of planning says that
answer to me.
seems to resolve the issue. Councillor Brightman.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any reason why they're all grey? Is there not a colour option, say that if they're against trees they could possibly be green, or if they're against a red brick building maybe red, so that they're less intrusive?
It is subject to condition 3 here, but the colour being picked is a matter of debate elsewhere, isn't it? Mr. Roger.
Further to the point I mentioned before, Meg presented, we have asked questions about the cabinets, and we haven't even had an answer to that. So I'm not remotely suggesting we defer this for officers to have a dialogue on the colour, but I'm not even confident if we did we'd even get an answer, to be honest.
But we are putting in a condition here around the details of the colour, and officers will determine an acceptable colour that is going to minimise the visual impact in the street scene. Okay, so I've forgotten what happened there.
Add construction logistics
construction condition to be additional to go in there, and it was moved and it was seconded. That's complete. No other points. Can we show of hands on that, please? That's everybody. Thank you. Okay. 10's done. 11. Long Lane, Wheeled Road, Long Lane, Hillingdon, another monopole.
Thank you, Chairman. Another monopole. This is one that again involves a resiting as opposed to the siting in the same position. And again, it is a more prominent position, but also it is sited in amongst a number of trees which are on the highway and which are very attractive trees. So not only the visual impact in terms of the siting and size of the cabinets and the monopole, but also the impact on the existing trees is cited as a reason for refusal. We don't have information provided in relation to the impact that the proposal will have on the trees. The tree officer has said that there is a likely impact from the concrete digging and foundations and base that will need to be provided for the cabinets and the monopole. And until that information is received, we think there will be an impact on the trees. If I can just go to the plans and photographs again, very similar plans to the ones you've seen before, and this is a siting. You see the large trees that surround it, and it is sited in amongst these trees, so it is an impact that we consider is unacceptable for 2 reasons. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I mean, this one's a little bit easier when such valued street trees are at risk and we're not being provided the information to ensure their continued existence. Councillor Dillon.
It's also quite an open area, that, so to crowd it out with those cabinets, I think would be detrimental to the street scene. But I would move officers' recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chandel.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. I'll second that.
Thank you. Show of hands, please. Everybody. Thank you. 12 was withdrawn. 13. Let's for a change go to a change of use. 5 to 7 Pantar Walk.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a unit which is within the Pavilion Shopping Centre. It doesn't have a street frontage. The change of use complies with the council's policies in terms of the setting within the primary shopping area, and the use proposed will have no impact on any of the occupiers within the unit. It is an office where you take the theory test, in essence, for the driving test. The theory element of that test is taken within this unit, so a very quiet use, I would suggest, and therefore no impact on the street scene, and therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Tugwell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think a refreshing change from monopoles really on this one, but we've got one to come yet. But no, I think for me, I've got no issues with this one. It's a vacant unit. No impact on the retail percentage, and I think it will draw people into the shopping centre, which will help the neighbouring retail outlets. So I will move officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ahmed Bolana.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to second this.
Thank you. Show of hands, please. Everybody? And for item 14, we're going back to our beloved polls. Harlington Road.
May feel like this is a telecommunications committee, but again, this is very similar to the previous ones. The equipment and size of the monopole is the same. This is a resiting again, and again, it is a resiting close to trees. So. And again, we have no information of the impact that this will have on the trees. So again, we're recommending for two reasons, the impact visually and the impact on the trees. If I can just go again to the photographs. And it's set in amongst those trees, and that's where the siting of it is. And again, you've got these very large and attractive trees, which your tree officers consider will be impacted, and therefore we're recommending refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chandal, you indicated, and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's deja vu there again. I think I'll go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Thank you. Show of hands, please. Everybody. That completes part one. We're now turning into part two. You just give us a few minutes or a few seconds to break the link.